Robin Zander, scene A1.
Hi there, I'm Robin Zander, and you're listening to Snafu. My guest today is the author Michael Bugay Steiner. Michael is the author of the best-selling book The Coaching Habit and his most recent How to Work with Almost Anybody. In this conversation, wide-ranging and in-depth, we talk about his writing practices and how he's written more than 8 books. We talk about how he thinks of his career in projects and how a book or a business or another project entirely becomes the focus for a season. We talk about what he's learned about habit and behavior change more generally. And we talk about personal branding. Michael has a lisp and he has big ears and he stands out in a noisy environment as somebody who is really quite unique and very thoughtful in his thinking, in his writing, in his communication, playing to his strengths and not trying to make up for his weaknesses. So we talk about how he has done that strategically and what any of us can do to develop the self-confidence to lean into those parts of ourselves that maybe we don't necessarily want to share on the internet. So I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with my friend and incredible author and entrepreneur, MBS, or Michael Bugay Steiner. Enjoy. All right, Michael Bugay Steiner, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Robin, it is good to be here. Thank you.
It's been really fun. You know, we've just spent a little bit of time together in person at this point, mostly getting to know each other around Responsive Conference. But I've looked to you as an author and as sort of an authority, and also as somebody who's really subtly quite brilliant at brand. I put you on the same pedestal, if you will, as Seth Godin, actually.
That's high praise indeed. Although I need to shave my hair off because Seth never ages. That's part of his secret.
It's true.
He's the same as he was 30 years ago. Yeah.
But you've done such an incredible job, both in your books, which we'll talk about momentarily, but in your representation of yourself on the internet, as I think of the Eminem and the movie 8 Mile, of owning your weaknesses and making them strengths. Right. You're kind of weird. You're kind of funny. Like you're my kind of dork, and I say that as somebody who was very much a circus dork in high school in a town that was not socially acceptable. I'm really curious how you've gone about, because it looks intentional, and I say that as a brand guy, where you've said, okay, what are the things that make me unique, and then leaned into them, both in your writing and also in your digital presence, and even like the caricatures of yourself on the internet, your headshots and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say that I was a brilliant brand person, and B, this is a cunningly planned strategy. Although it's not untrue, it's just not the whole truth. There is, first of all, a wiring that I have, which is I like to zig when others zag. And that's been true my whole life. I've always liked to kind of show up and show off and be a bit different and be a bit weird. I mean, my mum tells a story of me as a 4-year-old going up to people in supermarkets going, "Hi, my name is Michael and I can hop. Would you like to see me hop?"
Amazing.
And honestly, that is pretty much my brand strategy even to this day. I'm more expensive now than I was then, but it's not. I haven't changed that much. And as a kid, I liked. We in Australia we call them a dress-up box or a tickle trunk. It's kind of like full of random clothes, and you could dress up and play characters. I loved the dress-up box, and I would play with my next-door neighbor, Louise, who'd come over. And we'd always have this fight because I wanted to dress up in the girls' clothes because the girls got shoes and pearls and blouses
shiny stuff.
And handbags and hats and the whole lot. And, the men's clothes was like a tie or something. I'm like, there's something fun and kind of like getting in and showing off like that. So there's partly a zig when others zag, partly it's like I like showing off. And then there is something about amplify the difference. I remember we talked about Seth right at the start, and his book Purple Cow was a real boost for me. it's a short little book, and it showed up about the same time as Tom Peters did a series on Brand U, I think it was called. And this idea of being a purple cow, I'm like, oh, that spoke to a deep truth for me. And I realize that if it's a level playing field, I'm just never going to win. I'm just not that good at anything. But it's reminding me of another story I've got for you, Richard. So I'm a Rhodes Scholar, which is in some parts of the world a fancy thing, and I won it as an Australian Rhodes Scholar, and it was a thing because actually I had applied in my fourth year at university and didn't even get a first round interview. I was a bit down about that, but in my sixth year of university in Australia, because I did a combined degree, I got in, and I'm like, great, I'm getting an interview, and I had to decide what to wear for the interview, and I just thought to myself, look, I'm competing against really smart people. I'm good, but I'm not that good. So everybody else showed up wearing blue suit, white shirt, red tie, or pearls, depending on the gender. I showed up with long blonde hair, like longer than yours, blonder than yours, all my earrings in. I had a pink tie-dye tie. I had a purple jacket. And I'm like, I'm going to come last by distance, or they're going to make a bet on the person who's a bit odd. And they picked me. And it literally, metaphorically, and every other way changed my life. So, different and okay often trumps better, but the same as, in terms of the experience. And so it's been something that I've got. Look, I've got enough weirdness, like everything from having a cleft lip and palate and a speech impediment to having big ears to like nobody will be able to see this, but I've grown a moustache at the moment, like a handlebar moustache.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is like, oh, you've hit new lows in ugliness. Like, I thought your previous moustache was the ugliest thing ever seen, but apparently you can go even worse.
Shout out to your long-suffering wife, who you reference in all of your books.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I'm growing this because I can, and because I can shave it off, and because it's a bit weird, and it's a bit different, and I love that. And it's also, helpfully for me now, it's like on brand to show up with bad hair. So I'm like, it's all good. So, Robin, as a rambling answer, I'm afraid, but I have made a point of trying to figure out how to be different and to stand out. Like the training company I started is called Box of Crayons, and that's an odd name that stands out from the crowd. The number of times people have gone, oh yeah, I've heard of Box of Crayons, and I think to myself, you probably haven't. Because we're not that big, we're not that fancy, but it's got enough of a kind of difference and a magic, and all of this has helped Robin by me having a pretty solid sense of self and a pretty solid self-esteem. So I don't mind that sense of being a little bit different.
It's so fun. I went to my 20th high school reunion last weekend. And there was like half of the people there looked exactly like they did in high school. Half of the people were completely unrecognizable, and I wasn't sure if they were the spouse of or actually someone I knew. Yeah. I was told, and I'll take it as a compliment, that I was in the former category.
That's nice.
But yeah. I grew up a very sensitive kid in a rural town. Right, I was beat up every day in middle school. I ended up homeschooling for a while just to kind of get away from that. And fortunately, my parents, offered me those opportunities.
Yeah.
But what advice and right, we can take this as personal therapy if you're willing, or go more broadly. But like, how does somebody develop that sense of self? How does somebody say, okay, these are the things? Like, it's really easy to say, oh, I'm an acrobat and I was self-taught as an acrobat, right? Because that sounds pretty cool, right? Who doesn't want to be able to do a flip on stage?
Yeah.
Especially since I learned to do that as an adult. But that's not leaning into the weird and the sensitive and the different, right? What advice would you give me or give anybody to harness those things, right? I think of Seth always has those colored glasses.
That's right.
Right? My friend Smiley, who's an author and a speaker, was made fun of in middle school for having a big smile, and now that's his speaker name, his stage name, and his nickname, right? As you say, you do have big ears, right? And you really owned that without shame. how do you flip that? How do you teach people or inspire people to really recognize those differences and make them strengths?
Well, it's not easy because there's a relentless backbeat in society to conform. Like people like you to not be weird. It's a biological thing. Like there's this part of our lizard brain that goes, I like people who look like me and sound like me and play like me and aren't different from me. It makes me feel like we're part of a tribe together, and biologically that's helped us survive for the last X number of thousands of years because we're all in the tribe together. And the price you get for that is it's very easy to other people who don't look like you, sound like you, all of that sort of stuff. So you're up against a biological imperative. I think it's if you're lucky, you've got people around you who see you. If I'm known at all, I'm known in the world of coaching, and coaching is about good questions and it's about making progress. But increasingly, I'm aware that often coaching creates space where somebody feels seen and feels heard. And often, the thing to teach newer coaches is to calm down on the let's make progress and let's make sure that people feel seen and heard and safe and kind of complete in a way. Yeah, connected as a powerful way of doing that. So I think of this I'm happily a child-free man, but my brothers have kids. And one of my nephews, Hendrix, has always been a bit weird, has always been a bit odd. And I have secretly gone, please, 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 keep that. Like, please don't have it squeezed out during your young man, adult years where there's this kind of push to conform. Because your weirdness probably is going to make you the most interesting of my nieces and nephews in another 10 to 15 years. So I think if you're lucky, you've got people around you who can see you. And one of the signature on my email is "You're awesome and you're doing great." And
which I love.
well, thank you. I started saying it in sessions I was facilitating, just as a kind of, let me try this. And it's weird when I get people to turn to the person they've been working with and say this to your partner. And they're like, oh, this is awkward. And I'm like, it's awkward, isn't it? And they're like, yes, it's awkward. And then I get them to do it another 2 or 3 times during a session. And by the 4th time, they're like, you're awesome and you're doing great. They're kind of saying it with heart and they're feeling it. And probably weekly, I get some note from somebody saying, hey, thanks for saying that. That was helpful. So I think step number 1 is that. Step number 2 is luck. Like, I think you get wired with a sense of resilience or not around belief in yourself. I happen to get really lucky with that. I have almost always had a pretty robust sense of my own worth. My parents used to, because I was a bit weird to my parents. My parents were government, worked in the government, stayed at home. Dad had the same job for 30 years. Mum, did sort of things. And they looked at me and they're like, who is this alien child? I mean, it's undeniably our child because I look just like my dad and, obviously my mum gave birth to me. But who is he? Really, he shows up with a different orientation to the world. And they literally said to me, we spent the first 12 years of your life waiting for you to land in the shit and finally learn a lesson, but you always used to bounce up and go ta-da. At a certain point they're like, we'll just have to give up on that because he's wired to be able to turn any disaster into a story where somehow he's still the hero even though he's failed utterly. So luck is part of it. But you see those videos on social media, LinkedIn and the like, which is like this young kid looking at themselves in the mirror going, I am awesome, I am great, I can dance, I am wonderful, I am smart, I am this. And it's adorable and cheesy, and I suspect there's something really powerful about that as well, which is kind of a story you tell yourself about your worth. Now, the dark side of that is kind of a fragility or a sense of privilege or a sense of kind of you know, I am more valuable than others. So all of this is entangled with how do you develop a sense of humility as well. And humility for me, Robin, is what does it mean to have your feet on the ground and to be as conscious and as loving to the things you're not good at as to the things you are good at. Like I'm really clear about what my flaws are, and I try and make them slightly less flawed. But I'm just there's just some stuff I'm not great at. And I'm as clear-eyed on that, I think, as I am on the stuff that I'm good at. And I hold them both lightly because there's
I
like,
have
this
to
is just,
ask
yeah.
as a tangent, but like, what are a few of the things that you're particularly bad at?
Well, I'm never going to do a somersault on stage, so we can take that off the list right away. I've got the flexibility of an oak tree, but that's not really what you're asking. It's so I would say I'm not that great at communicating, particularly to the people who are closest to me. So one of the things that I would love to be is a better storyteller to my wife in particular. Because, honestly, I'm like a 14-year-old boy. She's like, how's your day? I'm like, good. She goes, did anything happen? I'm like, nah. She goes, did you talk to anybody? I can't remember. And I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? And she is a great storyteller. And so I know she's like, man, if I could change one thing, it would be to up Michael's conversational game. And so I'm trying to get better at that, but I'm never going to be really great at it, as one example.
Amazing. That's so funny. The I would not have guessed that, so I'm particularly glad to have asked it. I wanted to read a little piece.
Neither would my wife. She's like, damn it all, Michael, you spend your whole day entertaining people, being a storyteller. Like I'm pretty eloquent on a stage. I've been a bit rambly on this podcast, but normally I'm pretty good on a podcast. I'm good at us. Like, it's a real surprise to people. Like, yeah, I kind of suck at communicating. I'm like, yeah, but it's a certain type of communication that I'm not that great at.
As I was reading, I haven't read all of your books, of which there are
What?
about like 17, but right, of course, The Coaching Habit, which we'll get into, and your most recent, How to Work with Almost Anybody.
Yeah.
But in your writing, you are such a compelling storyteller. And there's these little vignettes, and I rarely laugh out loud as frequently reading a book as I do reading your little books.
I love that.
They're quick, they're digestible, and there's these little pieces of humor that are just hilarious. So this is from How to Work with Almost Anybody.
Yeah, great.
And it's specifically on the repair question chapter. You say, Japan is on a fault line. The history of tidal waves stretching back for hundreds of years is marked on tsunami stones that can be found up and down the northeastern coast. They register the high points of particularly devastating tsunamis and enshrine generational memory about what's safe and what may not be. In 1933, a tsunami, the second in less than 40 years, struck the village of, I'm going to mispronounce this, Enosoi. The stone there reads, "High dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Do not build any homes below this point." And it's just like, it's so sweet. It's so funny. It's so real. My best friend lives on the island of Vieques off of mainland Puerto Rico, which is a 7,000 person island. And there are tsunami warnings, right? Up to a certain point, and they're on a high point or higher point on the island. But you start so many of your chapters with these little vignettes that are deeply personal and poetic. And then go into, tie it into the domain of whether we're talking the coaching habit or how to work with almost anybody or whatever the principle is that you're getting across.
Yeah. I've never met a metaphor that I couldn't take and bend to my own will.
What's your writing process for capturing those little vignettes? And I really feel like some of these books have a lot of poetry in them. that you've taken a metaphor, tied it into something grander, and created these very heartfelt, very sincere
Yeah.
lessons learned.
Well, I'll start off by saying I find a lot of business books and self-help books, and my books kind of play in those two spaces, to be too long and too boring and too sanctimonious and too self-righteous most of the time. So, so I'm already this comes back to trying to be different. I'm trying to make a stand to be different, but not just for the sake of being different, but for the sake of the poor people who have to read my books. I'm like, my goal is to get you to finish the book, because there's a hierarchy, Robin. The worst thing in the world is writing a book, except for then trying to sell a book, except for then trying to get people to read the book, because that's the hardest thing. So when you're writing a book, you're doing all you can to maintain momentum so people get to the end of the book. So I start off with the design principle, which is, what's the shortest book I can write that is the most useful? So with this latest book, How to Work with Almost Anyone, I said to my editor, our goal is to get this under 20,000 words. A typical business book's like 65,000 words, and I'm like, under 20. We didn't make it. It was like 22,000 in the end, I think. But I said to her, you've got to slash this book. You've got to red pen it, in a vicious way. No nicey editing. You've got to get really kind of cruel to this book, because the more I can cut out, the more likely I am to have something that is essential left and compelling around that. And when I'm writing, I studied literature at university. I ended up doing a master's degree at Oxford University in modern literature. So it's quite daunting, because I've read some really good books in my time, and I'm like, wow, I'm trying to be a writer, and I'm trying to stand next to some of these people. It's quite the standard. It's why I can never really write a fable book. There's like, my name is Bob and I'm a manager, but I'm strangely unhappy. And then my boss said, come into my office and let me tell you this piece of wisdom. And I'm like, that can't be true. But then suddenly it turned out to be true, and I became a wiser, better person. I'm like,
that was a great book in about 3 sentences there. I appreciate it.
Like somebody like a Pat Lencioni writes fable books, and he probably does it better than most, and they still drive me nuts, because I'm like, I've read good stories with really great characters in them, and none of them are in those fable books. So my way in, and kind of my voice, is hopefully a light touch, a sense of my personality, and often a metaphor. And so, you're reading about the tidal wave stones in Japan is a classic. Oh, I read that, I liked it, I captured it somewhere, and then pulled it back into that book. That said, Robin, I'm also going, is this becoming a crutch for me to rely on? I'm like, is every chapter I ever write going to be, here's a weird metaphor, oh, and here's a leap to a teaching point that I want to make?
Sure.
So now, in the book I'm writing at the moment, I'm like, so what if I wasn't allowed to do that? How would I start a chapter in a different way? How would I, provoke my own creative act so that it's a bit different?
What's your routine when you're writing a new book, or maybe do you write every day regardless of whether you're working on a new book at the moment? Tell me a little bit, and I ask this very selfishly. I self-published a book about how to do handstands in 2012, which did quite well on the Amazon Kindle store. Brilliant. Back in the earliest days of Kindle publishing. And then I wrote Responsive, How to Build a Thriving Organization, which was a series of interviews with all of my responsive speakers for Responsive Conference in 2017. At the end of that, I really burnt out and hadn't written again until last year. So 2023, I started writing a weekly newsletter again about sales and behavior change, about how to, for influencing ourselves or other people or clients and customers, change behavior for the good.
Yeah.
And it's been really rewarding to write again, but I have this kind of daunting burnout in the background. 17 was the same year I went through a heartbreak, running Responsive Conference, publishing this book, and sold Robin's Cafe. Right. And so it was
a quiet year for you.
Yeah, very quiet year. And so I guess I sold the cafe in 2018, but I decided to sell it in 2017 to be accurate. how do you build the cadence? Because as you say, right, like writing, I get in a cold plunge every single morning, and it's never not hard.
Right.
Sitting in 39 degrees of water for a
Yeah.
minute or 3 minutes is miserable.
Yeah.
Writing is also kind of miserable, but I like
Yeah.
who I am afterwards. I feel
Right.
great in the adrenaline and in the endorphins of a cold plunge afterwards. I feel
Yeah.
great having stretched my brain in writing for an hour.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your routine and how you've done it for so long and kind of built the what looks like a system, at least from the
Yeah.
outside.
Um, it's not. It's held together with duct tape and spit and hope rather than being a rigorous system. I mean, you read The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp, and she's like, well, I wake up at this time, I get the same taxi,
She's a
it drives me to
machine.
the gym, I do this workout, I go back, I pull out my banker's box, which is the project I'm working at the moment, and I work on my thing, and I'm like, yeah, that's I wish I could do any of those things, let alone have all of them combined together. Um, but I I had a phase where I would self-identify as a writer. I think now I'm more likely to self-identify as a creator or a maker, even perhaps, because what I do is um, podcasts and newsletters and books and designing training and keynotes and the like. So it's more about turning my desire to create to different formats depending on what's required at the moment. So I don't have I'm actually just started to be in between books. I've got a journal coming out in January that's done and dusted. I'm about to start an initiative on how change works in organizations. And so I'm building up the infrastructure around that. It's not writing, but it's creative work. I'm imagining the brand, I'm imagining the business model, I'm imagining the guests for the podcast, I'm imagining trying to find the right people to work with. These are all creative acts, I think. However, when I get to a place where I've signed a contract and I'm writing a book, and I hybrid publish all of my books. I work with a company called Page Two. And even though I'm hybrid publishing and I love the control it gives me because I kind of become the executive publisher of all my own stuff, nonetheless, there's a contract and there's an editor and there's a timeline. So I'm now working against the clock. And I shift my calendar so that I'm then writing. I will write most days. Typically I'm trying to write 1,500 words a day, because if my books are 20,000 words, and I have to write a 50,000 word book to get a 20,000 word book, 1,500 words means that in 2 months writing, I'm going to get close to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I reboot my calendar around that. Now, this change project is my key initiative now. So I have booked out basically 1 full day and 3 half days per week to be focused entirely on this change project. And I'm lucky enough to have an assistant, Claudine. And I'm like, Claudine, you have to protect me from myself, because what I normally do with this is I now then just book meetings over the time I've held as protective stuff. Because, one of my core values is freedom, which means that all the systems I set up for myself, I then go about trying to hack because nobody's going to pin me down. It's very annoying, which is like, I'm trying to do this for my own good, but I'm like, down with the man. I am the man. I know it's confusing, but I'm trying to hack my own systems here. It's like, it's too much. But, and therefore what that means is I keep having to muscle up around my ability to say no. And you know this because, I was going to come and speak at the Responsive Conference this year, and then I'm like, actually, I'm going to Australia, and I can't make this anymore. I can't make this work. I'm going to be too far away, too long away from home. I've got to say no. And you're like, oh, come on. And I'm like, I know. I literally begged you to invite me to the conference, and then went, sorry, I can't make it. It's like some crappy bait and switch. I don't know what's going on. But that... building that capacity to say no and disappoint people is part of what then allows me to actually, when I say protecting time, I'm actually protecting time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You find me looking down and just taking copious notes. I really like I'm interested in learning more about page 2 in your hybrid model of publishing, but the 1,500 words a day, taking 50,000 words, condensing it into a 20,000 word book, writing that in 2 months.
And that's just writing the first draft in 2 months. Because
right,
then there's endless iterations of self-loathing and doubt as you move through drafts 2 through 7 to finally having a book starting to emerge from the mess.
I'm reminded of Stephen King's On Writing, which is just a beautiful memoir. He talks about writing the first draft of a book in a season, right? Which is 3-ish months, and I think there's a similar style there. I'm also just chuckling at the extent to which I will. I'll get up in the morning and I could just walk straight into my cold plunge, but instead I will go open the shades and let my dog out and then go chase her because she's barking and then go make some tea and go look at my phone and spend 3 hours procrastinating before I do the first thing of my day, which is get in the cold plunge.
I just heard a podcast with a comedian called Rob Delaney, who is on Desert Island Disc, so a British BBC podcast, and he was most famous for a TV series called Catastrophe, which he co-wrote with somebody, but he's actually also appearing in the Deadpool and the new Deadpool movie. Anyway, he's a writer as well as an actor, comedian, and he said in this podcast, and I listened to it as I went for a walk this morning, he said, what separates the big dogs from the young pups, he said this in a kind of mock Western voice, is that the big dogs go, this is great, I have a crappy first draft. It's like, he said, and I love this quote, a good day is by how long I've sat there going click, click, click on the keyboard, not on the quality of the words that I've written. Because it's like you put in the time, you write the words, you rewrite the words, you rewrite the words, you rewrite the words, and eventually something interesting starts showing up.
You reference how to build habits in the coaching habit. And I like that you pull from a lot of different people. Charles Duhigg, who's been on this podcast, my old professor at Stanford, BJ Fogg, who wrote Tiny Habits, who's also been on the pod. The idea that I took away from working with BJ for many years and from reading Tiny Habits was the chapter on celebration and on taking small successes and making them bigger. Right, this idea that what we channel emotion towards, what we feel strongly about, is something that shapes our behavior, is something that shapes habits.
Yeah,
and that's what I hear you saying is like, okay, it doesn't matter. The big dogs are the ones who are celebrating that they put in the work, not the outcome.
Yeah, and it's helpful to literally celebrate it. And this is a hard
pump the fist.
Yeah, it's a hard-earned lesson for me because, part of my wiring is future-focused, and that can be great at times, but it's rare. It's a learned skill to stop and celebrate. And now when I talk to authors and I'm like, and they're like, got any tips on how to market your book? I'm like, well, yeah, I got 2 tips. The first tip is pick one thing and do it really well. Because with book marketing, there's 98,000 things you can do, and the temptation is to do a half-assed job on all of them.
Yeah.
So it's like pick 1 or 2 core tactics and then double down on that and kind of be extraordinary on those. And the second thing is, on the day your book launches, have a party to celebrate it. Because it took me to like my 8th book or my 9th book for me to remember that crossing that finish line is no small thing. And it's like, go find some people you like hanging out with and go, woohoo, look at me, I wrote a book. You'll have the rest of your life to try and market it and sell it and do all of that sort of stuff, and that's the grind that awaits you. But lots of authors, like Pub Day comes and they're so worried about the hustle that they forget to just go, this is great, I've literally written a book, Yeah.
That's great, Michael. Is there anything else about habit formation in general that you've learned or that you think of, especially, right? It's the first chunk of the coaching habits, the first chapter. But anything else in the book or outside about habit formation that you think is often overlooked?
the point of a habit is to stop thinking about it. And so any way you can just make this thing the automatic thing that you do just saves your brain from having a boring debate around it. So, as an example, 3 examples. When I get into an Uber and the Uber asks me for a tip, and it gives me 3 options, I hit the middle one. So I don't go, well, is this a $2 tip or a $3 tip, or is it 21% or 26%? Because they come up with different variations. I just go, it's the middle tip, and I always tip the person. When I'm walking up my local street in Roncesvalles and somebody asks me for money, I carry little gift cards from my local coffee shop, and I give them a gift card. I don't go, are you morally deserving of this? Are you worthy of this? Should you be doing this? I don't know. I just go, look, if you ask, I will give you this. I've got a gym that crushes my spirit every time I go there because they work me too hard. But I'm like, if I'm in Toronto and it's a Tuesday or Thursday at 7 o'clock, I sign up and I go there. And Tuesday the week before, I put in those 2 things into my calendar and I sign up for them. And I'm like, it's not a conversation. I just get up there and I do it. So, what annoys me with habits is the relentlessly tedious debates I have with myself around why I should be breaking this particular habit. And so I just try and make it increasingly hard to have those debates. Like if I'm trying to stop eating ice cream, and by the way, if you're in Toronto, Honey's does an amazing vegan ice cream, which I can totally recommend. I'm like, so don't have ice cream in the house. I think trying to remove things so that you're not tempted. And also, and this is, what's her name? It'll come to me in a second. No matter. She's like, it's easier to say I never do this than I occasionally do this. So I just did this thing where I spent 75 days not drinking, and I'm like, this is really clear. I just don't drink during this 75-day period. And even though my wife was like, I'm having another glass of champagne, and I'm like, yeah, but not for me. As tempting as it is to have some champagne with you, during the 75 days, I'm not drinking, so I'm not drinking.
Nice. Yeah. I know for some people, doing things in half measures or doing things in moderation, I am incapable of moderation. You give me one bite of a pint of Ben & Jerry's mint chocolate cookie ice cream, and the pint is gone, right?
Exactly.
And so...
and then there's that great quote from William Blake, the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. So then you're like, I'm actually becoming wiser by eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's. You're welcome. Yeah.
Let's talk about how to work with almost anyone. Okay. As I was going through it, I found myself actually referencing my relationship with my mother more than colleagues or employees. I went for a walk with one of my colleagues on Responsive Conference this year, a really incredible, our lead facilitator, who's organizing this group of facilitators who brings together all of our attendees into small groups each day of the conference.
Beautiful.
And was talking about my relationship with my mother, which over the last 20 years, right, I'm 38, has been a really important focus. My mother is that person in the world who pushes all my buttons. Why? Because she installed them, right? As the joke goes.
Yeah.
And we went to Ghana together, which was a lifelong dream of hers. This is actually her artwork behind me here.
Oh, beautiful.
That she made these specifically when my younger nephew was born to kind of celebrate his birth. But she had always wanted to go to Ghana to see the origins of Ghanaian fabric and textiles. She's painted textiles for many, many years. And my mother can be very controlling. She can be very strong-willed, to say the least, right? And in going to Ghana, we went to therapy in advance and had some really intense conversations about, like, who am I as an adult son who is going to be helping her make that trip, right? Which would otherwise not have been possible had I not gone on it with her.
Right.
I'm curious for you, like, where did the idea of writing How to Work with Almost Anyone come from? Where is that personally or professionally for you? Because right? Like the quality of our work lives and the quality of our lives are determined by how we show up with those people that we spend the most time with or are the most dear
Exactly.
to us. Where did that idea originate for you?
So the kind of catalyst for it was 25 years ago when a writer and a thinker called Peter Block talked about and taught me, just did a class on something he called social contracting, which is essentially the same idea I have in this book, which is having a conversation about how you work together before doing the work will probably mean that you do the work better. Um, and I love Peter Block. He's this kind of slightly grumpy, slightly prickly guy, but he's brilliant in this field of organizational change and also interpersonal relationships and also kind of existential. What does it mean to take responsibility for your own freedom? That's his phrase. So that's where that seed got planted, and then having finished my previous book, I kind of run my life on projects. I'm like, what's my best guess at the next big project that I should take on? One that speaks to this idea that a project should be thrilling and important and daunting. So thrilling, it lights me up. Important, that it serves the world. Daunting, that it'll stretch me and grow me. Also, a project that will take me closer to my kind of broader mission that I hold for myself, which is to infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus. In other words, help people make braver choices in the moments that they have. And when this is probably 2 years ago now, or a bit longer, I was like, the best guess I can do is like teach this idea of social contracting. And then as part of that, I dug very deep into work I knew partially with people who are specialists in human relationships. So Terry Real, Esther Perel, the Gottmans, Dan Siegel. These are people who I think write brilliantly about human interaction and human relationships. And so it delights me to hear that there may be some value to your relationship with your mum in that book, because there's a wind of I'm not sure if this metaphor will get confusing. The wind of brilliant people are blowing in the sails of this book. That's a terrible metaphor. I can't claim to be an expert in human relationships. I'm better at claiming that I can help people work better together. But there's as with most of my work, there's often there's stuff underwater, like the iceberg metaphor. My job is to try and create simplicity on the other side of complexity, so people go, oh, okay, I can get this and I understand it. And if you know the work, you see the depth behind it as well.
Mm-hmm. You have a piece that I like, and it was a phrasing that I haven't used, but I may adopt, which is development versus performance. I think a lot about practice intervals versus performance intervals as somebody whose much of my life has been through the physical lens. I was a cross-country runner for a decade and then went into ballet and gymnastics and the circus. Are we trying to shoot, I don't play basketball, but are we trying to shoot basketball hoops from the free throw line, or are we trying to shoot from all over the court? If we're trying to, if you're trying to shoot from the free throw line, my little bit of dyslexia, and I'm from all over the court, I'm going to do less well.
Yeah.
But if we then switch it and say 2 weeks later, I've been practicing on a variable basis and you've been practicing on a route and routine basis, I'm going to retain the skills and perform better in the long run, right? And it's so easy to measure performance, back to the writing project, right? Measure performance based on how the output is in the moment versus on how well we retain the information and transfer skills across disciplines.
It's one of the annoying paradoxes of learning, which is making it harder for people to learn makes the learning less enjoyable but more efficient. So, you've got this choice, like as you organize responsive conference, partly it's like, wow, what are we optimizing for? A really good time or for stuff to stick? And of course you're like, Well, it needs to be a good time because I want 70% of these people to buy the tickets for 2025 when we offer them from the stage at the end of 2024. So if they're like, "This has sucked, man," then that's not good. So you're trying to do that dance between how much of this is engaging, but also how much of this gets sticky because of the way you structure it.
Hmm. How do you strike that balance in your life, personally or professionally?
I don't know. Um, I mean, I know that for myself, I um, love a project, love slash hate a project that takes me to the edge of who I am and what I know and what I can do. This project on how change works is asking a lot of me in terms of imagining how I do this as a professional rather than as a high performing amateur. My default is to go to high performing amateur because I can do high performing amateur better than most. But what this demands is me being a professional. And so it's like, stop colluding with, disguised mediocrity. Um, and I think when I'm teaching, um, partly it's a way of, partly it's a pace, I think, which is like I don't give people enough time to mull over the fact that this is harder than they thought they would be, and they're working much harder than they realized they would be. Um, Partly it's I get people spending quite a lot of time in small groups where it's just harder to opt out. Like if you're having a not great time and I'm talking to plenary, meaning I'm talking to, 300 people in a room, you can just see people going, I'm just passively resisting this. If I've broken people into 100 groups of three and I say, have a conversation amongst the three of you about this thing, it's actually much harder for you to opt out of that because the other two people are like, what are you doing, man? Step up. So I think there's a kind of a cunningness around that. I use, I think about the neuroscience of engagement a lot. So I've got a model. It's in the coaching habit, so you'll know this. Tribe, expectation, rank, and autonomy. The four drivers that keep people engaged rather than disengaged. If you can increase a sense of tribiness, in other words, we're in this together rather than it's you
People like
versus
us
me.
do things like this.
Expectation, meaning you can play with what people know will happen and what people don't know will happen. Rank, meaning you can make people feel more important rather than less important, more powerful rather than less powerful. And autonomy, meaning you give people as many choices as you can. Not all the choices, but there's more that you can give them to make decisions on. Then increasing the terror quotients, TERA, terror, the terror quotients, means that you're manipulating their brain so they feel more engaged, which means they've got more capacity to work on the hard stuff.
Hmm. What do you think is most missed about coaching, right? So I was a personal trainer fresh out of university and started working with people physically. Pretty quickly realized I didn't have the language to help people change and needed to develop kind of I had the physical skills. I could get people to do push-ups, but the emotional development, the personal development that came with it, we didn't have words for. And then in the last 20 years, we've just seen an explosion of coaching, right? Yeah. Certified or uncertified, life coach, career coach, relationship coach, sex coach, right? All of it.
All of it, yeah.
What do you think is missed about coaching in the world today?
By people who are coaches, by people being coached, or by people who are looking on going, what the hell is this all about?
I'd say that last category.
Well, I think stigma is probably too strong a word about it, but I think for an increasing number of people, having a coach is not weird or outlier or I'm broken. It's a nice luxury to have.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's getting normalized. I think there's coaching is just one of those words that can have all sorts of baggage attached to it. People aren't totally sure what it means. People aren't totally sure what is and isn't included. People aren't totally sure about who should have a coach and who shouldn't have a coach. So in some ways, when you go, what do you know about coaching? It's too big and too broad a category to really dive into. But what I hope people know is that if you think of the very best teachers you had at school, the ones that had a sense of they saw you and they got who you were, they had some useful content to impart, but wasn't all about the information, and they gave you a sense of stepping out to the edge of who you were and made it safe there so that you could become more competent and more confident and more autonomous and more self-sufficient. That's the best of what coaching is.
I'm struck by the word again, connection.
Yeah.
Right? Connecting to another person, connecting to self.
When I don't do a lot of coaching myself, I teach others. I tried to build a coaching practice, and to my surprise, discovered it wasn't the best way to spend my time. But when I do coach people, the language I use around what I'm striving for in that connection is fierce love. So love meaning, how do I make this person know that I'm 100% on their side? That's why I said yes to doing this. It's like I want the best for them. But a fierceness means I'm not going to compromise that hunger for the best for them by being nice, or by wimping out, or by not saying the hard thing, or not kind of having the conversation that might push them. So it needs to be safe. How to work with anyone, really. It's like, in how to work with anyone, I'm like, you're trying to build a relationship that is safe, but also vital, full of life, but also repairable. And I'm like, that's what I'm trying to bring to a coaching relationship, which is like this dance between safety and also edge, so that they're like, oh, this is where I grow, this is where I learn.
I've been enjoying the phrase joyful hard.
Joyful that's nice effort as well. Yeah.
Michael, I could keep doing this with you for hours. I really appreciate the time. We're sorry to miss you on stage at Responsive Conference 2024, but I am super excited to have you on stage at Responsive Conference 2025.
Sounds great.
The Coaching Habit, probably your best known book.
It is.
How to work with almost anybody, not necessarily anybody, but almost anybody. Your most recent. For folks listening and watching, where can they go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, the best place is to the website, which is mbs.works. And then there's all sorts of door holes you can go through. All of the books, you can find them there. Every single book has a bunch of free resources supporting the book. So whatever your book of choice is, you can go to that book title and find videos and downloads and other bits and pieces supporting it.
Well, when I published Responsive, Seth was a very small part and said to me at the day it went live, thank you for your work. So I'll end this interview with those same words. Thank you for the work that you do, Michael. It's really a pleasure. And it's always fun. There's that idea of don't meet your mentors, don't meet your heroes. And it's always gratifying when the people that I look up to are even better in person than they are in their written work online or published.
Well, that's good. If I knew that was the standard, I probably would have bailed on the podcast. So I'm glad you didn't tell me that beforehand.
So yeah, I don't think I can have higher praise than these are useful. They're quick reads. They're fun. And I rarely laugh aloud as frequently as I do when I'm reading your work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you very much, Michael.